says, you know, I'm always meanest to my best employees. So, right, the people who I actually think I can actually impact, I can change them, I can make them even better, and they kind of write off some of the others. So careful when you may want to be close to President Trump, because he does value engagement and people who actually will interact with him in a serious way. And Vladimir Putin's not going to do that. Let me two thoughts on this. One, if I were Vladimir Putin, I would not be counting on the fact that you're going to have a friendly President Trump. I would not be building my strategy around that. And Mike, why do you say that? Go look at the first 4 years of President Trump. The story was he was a Russian asset, right? CNN would tell you every morning on live TV, oh my gosh, he was in a hotel room. It was a fraud. It was a complete fraud. That same story is now rising again. He's friends with Vladimir Putin. Careful. It didn't turn out that way. We put more sanctions on Russia. We unleashed American energy, crushing the Russian energy economy. We provided defensive weapon systems to the Ukrainians, which President Obama had refused to do. And here's the best evidence that we were tough on Vladimir Putin. How much Ukrainian real estate did Vladimir Putin take on our watch, on our 4-year watch?
So, but that's
none.
In the past.
No, but this matters.
Now. Vladimir
But if you're looking,
Putin is laughing.
You can't walk away from the history. You can't pretend you wouldn't have said the same thing to me 7 years ago. You would have. You would have said, oh my gosh, he looks like he's cozying up with Vladimir. Didn't you see he trusts him more than he trusts the American intelligence services? I know, because you wrote it. Right? I know. Just don't overread.
So,
just
but weapon
watch
supplies and aid have been frozen to Ukraine. Vladimir Putin and his generals and oligarchs are laughing, saying, thank you, Donald Trump, for what you're doing. This helps us in the battlefield.
We'll see. I wouldn't be laughing if I were them.
Are you saying he doesn't?
I would. Who saved Ukraine? Barack Obama or Donald Trump? Just someone answer that for me.
But you're talking of the past.
When did he take Ukraine? When did he do it under Donald Trump? Did he take Crimea under Donald Trump? Does anybody? No, he didn't. No, you have to acknowledge. You can't pretend these away and just get all fantasized about some tweet. It's just, I regret that the whole world misunderstands the model. And I'm convinced that in the end, President Trump will completely deliver exactly on what it is he said he would do. Go look at the first tweet he said about Russia after he was inaugurated. He reminded Vladimir Putin that there could be real costs. That hasn't gone away.
So how does President Trump then see Putin? Does he see him as a political strongman who deserves his sphere of influence in Europe? There's much talk that America is returning to some kind of a 19th century Monroe Doctrine, isolationist at one level, expansionist when it comes to a Greenland, a Panama, areas in and around America. How does he actually see leaders like Donald Trump? Does he, from your experience, secretly admire political strongmen who the rest of the world will see as dictators and autocrats?
Yeah, the question misses the point. I have enormous respect for Vladimir Putin, too. I have respect for lots of leaders who I just despise and are evil and who kill people. I sat with Chairman Kim. I still respected him, right? He was the leader of North Korea. He was a very powerful person with nuclear weapons. One must respect that. Doesn't mean you use the term admire. I didn't admire him. I would, right? I thought he was indecent. As a Christian, I knew he was inhuman and evil. But you can still acknowledge that Vladimir Putin is the leader of that nation with a powerful nuclear capability, a military that is still, in spite of all that they have suffered, is still a pretty powerful military force on a global scale. And, you know, President Trump's model, right? I'll never forget, right? He talked about love letters between him and Chairman Kim. Mm-hmm. This is the guy who put the harshest sanctions on North Korea in all of recorded civilizational history. I got it. You looks like you're struggling to get your mind around this. I get it. Please be creative. Be creative. Acknowledge that you can both say, oh yeah, he's a nice guy, and then crush him. Right?
Secretary
just-
Pompeo.
But that's not happening. To take out from
Sir-
what Rahul said, that's not actually happening.
No.
Actually, what we see on the ground at the
Yeah.
moment is Russia getting an advantage
No, no,
from
no.
what's
Oh,
happened
no,
in the last
no,
couple
no,
of weeks.
No. That's unfair. No, let's be very clear. President Biden epically failed. NATO epically failed. This is a failure of NATO. You allowed an invasion by Vladimir Putin into Ukraine. President Trump did not allow that invasion. Right? This is unfair. President Biden then for months and months and by the way, President Biden's the one who withdrew from Afghanistan and created the debacle that was Afghanistan, not President Trump. And that emboldened Vladimir. Those are the kinds of things that signal to world leaders that you're weak and that you'll allow this to happen. Only the grace of God kept Kiev from being the front line for the Ukrainian-Russian battle. And that's because of a failure of NATO and President Biden, not President Trump. And so when you say, oh, these last weeks, I'm like, where were you for 4 years criticizing President Biden for refusing to provide F-16s, which I think they should have done, for telling the Ukrainians, yeah, you can have our weapons, but you can only fire them on your own soil. That is, you can have a missile, but you can only land in your country. That's essentially the proposition that the Biden administration put forward for 4 years. Until the last months where he said, yeah, now you can fire one and only 100 meters, but I want to be really careful and I don't want anything to do with it, right? I mean, come on. You all, people lose their minds with Donald Trump. Look at the reality, the actual actions, and see the outcomes that were delivered, and I have every expectation we'll continue to deliver them.
Secretary Pompeo, it's a matter of fact that it is Vladimir Putin and the Russian generals that took the infantry and tanks into Ukraine. Vladimir Zelensky and the Ukrainian army did not start the Russia-Ukraine war. If we hear from some of what has been said by the Trump administration in the recent days, it would almost seem as if Russia entering Ukraine was Zelensky and Ukraine's fault and not Putin's fault.
Yeah, I completely agree. This is one man or one man and his leadership team. They invaded. They're the aggressor. They're the evil forces. They're the ones that have killed scores and scores, thousands of civilians. I concede. I don't believe for a second that Vladimir Putin's story that is, oh my gosh, NATO got too close. I got nervous and had to invade.
NATO did get too close.
Right? I don't. He's had NATO on his border for an awfully long time. So that's not why he did. Vladimir Putin no more thought NATO was going to invade Russia than a man in the moon. Right? So I don't buy that narrative. By the way, some in my party do. Right? So even, not to forget Trump, many Republicans have that same narrative that says NATO expanded too far, too fast, and caused Vladimir Putin to have to do this. I just simply disagree with that. Vladimir Putin has wanted to restore the Soviet Union since he was a young man.
By the way, even as the conversation is going, we've just had a tweet from Donald Trump where Donald Trump said,
this is a great example. I have no idea what's in this tweet, but you all can't put your phones in your pocket for 20 minutes and without getting nervous about a tweet. So knock yourself out. Go ahead, read it to me.
Donald Trump has just said, based on the fact that Russia is absolutely pounding Ukraine on the battlefield right now, I am strongly considering large-scale banking sanctions and tariffs on Russia until a ceasefire and final settlement agreement on peace is reached. To Russia and Ukraine, get to the table right now before it is too late. Thank you. Is this serious? Is he just simply trying to grab attention? How do we interpret tweets like this from the US president?
Can I just add here? I think he's just validated Pompeo's
I must say,
Secretary Pompeo just said that. Just a while ago.
I couldn't.
No, is this the
like
noise?
that timing is like killer. I'm going to have to write him a note and thank him. Yeah. By the way, I said to you before he came out here, while we're on stage, there'll probably be some. Who knows?
Look, you told him what to say before you came here. It'll make my life easier.
I never told President Trump what to say.
No, but is this noise? Is this
No,
noise,
that's not. No,
Secretary?
I don't know. I'll have to go. We'll have to go. Here's how you'll know if it's noise. Will sanctions be put in place? Don't follow the tweet. Watch the policy line. Right. So he's signaling. Right. He's speaking. He's negotiating. Right. But what you need to watch is what do they actually do? And I'll give you the classic example. This is what's different. President Biden would literally say, we're going to put on sanctions. And does anybody think that the Russian economy has suffered? The GDP of Russia grew faster than the American GDP for the last 2.5 years, maybe 3, right? So President Biden would talk about, I'm going to be tough, and he'd go to Brussels and, say, nobody believed it. Did you believe it? Did anybody fear President Biden? Right?
Because he had trusted partners. Russia has trusted partners in China and
so
some
my
others.
point would be, if President Trump says he's going to put on sanctions, we do. We took the Iranians down to, well, by the way, your government wasn't particularly happy. We told you had to stop buying Iranian oil. And my guess is that's going to happen again as well. But put the Iranian file aside for a second. When President Trump did that, put those sanctions in place, we actually enforced them. We meant it. And my guess is if you watch the policy line here, the through line here, it won't surprise me about what he'll actually do that. And Putin will have to contend with that. Not a tweet. He doesn't have to contend with tweets. He'll have to contend with the fact that now it is harder for them to move money. I don't know what will fall through the SWIFT system, right? The logical follow on to a statement like that through SWIFT will be more difficult.
Secretary
And that will
Pompeo,
impose
since
real
you
costs
work
on
with
Russia.
Donald Trump, give everyone sitting here scratching their head, tearing their hair apart some tips. How do you know when Donald Trump is serious and when he's not?
Yeah, I don't do psychology. I just that's silly. Everyone wants to talk. Like, stop. Just watch the actions that get taken. This is the thing that gets missed. Everyone wants to do psychoanalysis instead of doing rational policy planning, and it's possible to do. And the way you do it is you watch the actual. Look, the tariff thing is disturbing to people because he has moved one forward and one back and then forward and then back. So I get how that's created enormous volatility in markets, enormous geopolitical uncertainty. I appreciate that. And I regret that. I think a more consistent through line there would have been better. But what I think you're witnessing is he's trying to gauge how far and how fast he can achieve the change that he's seeking to get as a policy matter. So I would just suggest watch the actions that get taken. Commerce will take actions. In this case, it'd be State, Treasury, and Commerce that will take the actions. Watch the actual actions that they put into place. They'll come pretty fast. You don't have to wait long.
Can I give you an example?
I don't know. Can you?
When U.S. President Donald Trump stuns the world in the morning by saying Gaza should become like the Riviera. We should all have, the world should come to Gaza. I want it to be the new Riviera. Should Palestinians across the world, Middle East countries all look at that statement and wonder which world is Donald Trump living in? Is that the way to look at, is he playing some kind of a giant rope trick on the world when you say, don't psychoanalyze it? The world will analyze a U.S. president.
Of course they can't, they can help themselves, but stay busier on more productive things. That would be my wisdom. Right. What was he communicating there? In Trumpian fashion, I will concede, not Pompeo fashion. I would do this differently. What was he communicating there? This place is terrible for the human beings that live there. And has been since 2006, since the Israelis left. And I don't like that. I want it to be different. I want them to have a better life. That's what he was communicating. The people that live in Gaza, right? That's what he was communicating there. He's like, you all have lived under the jackboot of the Iranians. They call themselves Hamas, but they're funded by the Iranians. And you've lived in poverty, you've lived in squalor, and you've lived without governance, and you lived under the threat of terror. And your life isn't as good as it ought to be. And I want it to be better.
Without any empathy about people who have been bombed for the last 12 months.
How is it not empathetic to say, I want their life to be better? How's that not maximally empathetic? I don't understand
Secretary
that.
Pompeo, can I just talk about policy over here? In Gaza, or the decision and policy in Gaza, there are very specific statements that have come on how they want to turn it into a Riviera, and how their beach houses can be sold. Palestinians are not buying those homes. They will not be able to afford it, even if they wanted to. One. Secondly, you're talking policy decision. I want to know, how is President Trump conducting himself as a businessman, looking at balance sheets of what your allies are doing, how much are they paying, how much are they not paying, or purely geostrategically? Because if it's geostrategic, even with Ukraine, it doesn't seem geostrategic, it seems transactional. He wants minerals of Ukraine. Gaza is resource rich. We're looking at gas, not just the land. So there is a lot that is beyond just land. And he's been imperialistic in his policy, in his statements when it comes to Denmark, when it comes to Greenland, so much more. How can his allies, since World War II, American allies, really trust him? This is the first time we're seeing Europe not being able to trust America.
Well, you just covered the whole world. I'm not sure where to begin to unpack it. President Trump does view the world through an economic lens. He views the connection between the economies of nations and the interaction of those economies as an absolute imperative to deliver geostrategic security. He doesn't see them as separate spaces. I completely, by the way, I mostly agree with him on that. That is absolutely true. So I don't know where you want me to begin. I'm happy to begin with what he's thinking about in the Middle East. Here's what he's thinking in the Middle East. He's thinking Iran is bad. Israel is a close ally and partner. The Gulf Arab states are really important. And the poor Palestinians have been trampled on by the Iranians for decades, and we ought to try to fix that. There's the model. That's how the Abraham Accords developed, with the same model, put enormous pressure on the Iranian economy. We took a strike on one of their senior leaders to protect American interests. The Iranians are still trying to kill me as a result of that. It was absolutely a righteous thing to do. It was the right thing. The whole world took note of that the United States was no longer going to do what President Obama had done and say, well, I might strike in Syria, I might not. Let me go talk to 74 people and then, wander around the Oval Office a little bit. And he just made a decision, and we did the right thing for the world and made the world a safer place. I think that's still what he's trying to do. And so he stares at Gaza and says, let's understand this. On campuses in America, they say that's been occupied. This is occupied territory. There hasn't been an Israeli in Gaza in 20 years, and it's not occupied, and it's hell on earth for the human beings that are living there. Let's go try to make it better. We have this opportunity now. They committed a massacre on October 7th. The Israelis have responded to that. They have diminished Iranian capacity to influence Gaza. Now let's see if we can't make it better. That's what he's, and by the way, maintain Israeli security, maintain Gulf Arab state security, both in Gaza, in Syria, where the regime has now fallen, do the same thing in Judea and Samaria and the West Bank. That's the mission set. So I'm guessing he will go back and do, I think Trump's second term with respect to Middle East policy will look the same, all aimed at what I view as an incredibly empathetic outcome. You said there was no empathy. That's indecent of you to suggest such a thing. No, it truly is.
Okay.
It's indecent because there's nothing empathetic about allowing Hamas to reestablish authority there. That is, you talk about no empathy for those human beings, to allow those terrorists to destroy the lives of the Palestinians living in Gaza. That's the most indecent thing a human being could possibly imagine, in my view.
Secretary Pompeo, we have 7 minutes left. I want your reading of Xi Jinping's mind and the military posturing of the People's Liberation Army and Navy. Several military officers at very senior levels in the United States have spoken of 2027 as being the year when the PLNL makes a go for Taiwan. Do you think that during the second Trump presidency, there is a how would you evaluate it on the scale of probability that the People's Liberation Army will make a military offensive on Taiwan? And as you best understand it, if this were to happen, given that you worked with Donald Trump, will Donald Trump and the United States live up to its commitment of coming to the military aid of Taiwan, or will they just sit back because they're more interested in Greenland?
So I can answer the second one more easily than the first. The second one is yes, there's no doubt the United States will assist in the defense of Taiwan. I've seen this play out too many times. Japan will immediately be involved. This gets big, fast, ugly. By the way, there's no winner to this thing. So anybody knows if the Chinese actually engage militarily in Taiwan, it's a bad day for the whole world because the entire global economy comes to a halt. Because once TSMC stops delivering chips to India, your economy is done. And I've seen different versions of this, and some of it's classified, but suffice it to say, 90 days. And so we all need to be sure that doesn't happen, that deterrence is sufficient to prevent this. Which gets to your first part. I actually think that the risk is far greater than that. Because I think Xi Jinping's smart enough not to do what I just described. Because he needs TSMC too. His economy comes to a grinding halt as well. And so I understand these couple generals and an admiral who said 2027, and I get their logic. It's possible they could be right. By the way, the Chinese invasion of Taiwan could have begun while we're sitting here. It's possible. I think Xi Jinping's smarter than that. I think he thinks he can do there what he did in Hong Kong and use propaganda, political influence, economic shaping, scare off Vietnam, Singapore, even India, right? Say, no, you guys need to back off, give me space. And then he can come to control it politically without having to ever fire a shot.
Do you think by coercion?
It depends how we all respond. So it's not, the answer is, can he do it? The answer is, depends how we all deal with him.
How is President Trump likely to respond?
I hope that we all respond by making very, very clear to him that that is unacceptable, that the United States can't live with that political outcome. And by the way, one of my great regrets as Secretary of State is that Hong Kong became unfree on my watch. And I think we could have done more and didn't. Maybe we couldn't have stopped it forever. Different situation. Hong Kong and Taiwan are not perfect parallels. I will concede that. But I think we could have kept freedom there a little longer. And we should do all the things necessary to make sure and maintain that. And there's a long list. Don't have time or the clock's running, but there's a long list of things that we collectively can do, including all the joint military exercises that India and the United States are doing together. They are very important to send signals about political interference, not only in Taiwan, but in the Philippines, in Vietnam, in Malaysia, and Indonesia, all throughout Asia and Southeast Asia. Very important.
So do you believe that Donald Trump, therefore, is committed to that original vision that America had post-World War II in particular, of playing some kind of a global policeman or working with global partners, Quad being an example of it? Is he really committed to that? Or do you see Donald Trump becoming over time more and more inward looking? You mentioned the domestic challenges that he has, and his entire coalition was built around MAGA, around Make America Great Again. Given that, are we going to see conceptually Donald Trump becoming over time more and more inward looking, or committed to these strategic alliances? He's walked out of the climate change out of Paris. He's taken America out of WHO. Could he take America out of certain strategic alliances, or is he still committed to that vision of America as a global policeman?
I don't see them as discontinued. You describe them as A or B. I don't see it that remotely that way. You can't make America great again without successful partners around the world. And I think President Trump demonstrated in his first term, he understood that as well, and still does. He has a deep Jacksonian streak to him, and that mean as much to an Indian audience, but a deep streak which says, we got to get this thing, if without the American economy cranked up, I can't be a good partner to the world. And I think that's largely true. There is this, and you have to be a little careful with the language, but there is this populist streak to what he's doing, and I have a definition of populism that might be a little bit different. I'm proud to say I have a populist streak in my own thinking as well, so I don't view this as a cuss word. But if you ask the question, I mean, look at his first days, how much time he's worked, how many foreign leaders he's met. I mean, he's met more foreign leaders in his first 6 weeks than President Biden did, I think, in the first year. So when you talk about being engaged with the globe, President Trump, by the way, he met with more foreign leaders before he took office, which I actually am a little troubled by. It's deeply outside of the American tradition, but he did. Because we frankly had a president who wasn't engaged in the world for the last 6 months.
Does he take advice, and who does he take advice from? Is he a lone ranger, as some see him, this populist political strongman, or is there a team that he takes advice from?
He listens to everyone.
Is he a good listener?
No, but neither am I. Right, it's a good listener. I don't even know what that means. President Trump will always be communicating, right? But if you're asking, does he take on board thoughts and ideas from other people? The answer is, I saw it every day and always.
Secretary Pompeo, given everything that you've seen...
By the way, it didn't mean he didn't agree with me, right? I'd say, here's what I think. You go, yeah, that's a good point. That's not what we're doing.
Good attention
Right.
span? Does he have a strong attention span?
He is at least in charge. President Biden for the last 2 years.
Does he love flattery, as we are told? He loves to be flattered.
Do you love flattery?
Rajdeep loves flash.
Not really.
Really? I
Not
do.
really.
I do. I'm guilty.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't. I'm told the way to Donald Trump's heart, as Starmer showed in his meeting, is keep praising Donald Trump. True?
I don't know. Again, I don't do psychoanalysis. You do
Secretary
psychoanalysis.
Pompeo, I have a question which I want to ask you. Given what you've seen and what you know, what do you make of the fact that the People's Liberation Army amassed in great numbers against the Indian Army along the line of actual control? What do you make of the military mind and the thinking of the PLA? Because so much has been debated in India about why they did it, why they've pulled back, and what happens next.
It's a good question. I don't think there's any doubt that the PLA and the senior strategic security apparatus inside of China is following Xi Jinping's model intently, which is to test and to probe and to see who's going to respond and how they're going to respond. Are they prepared to commit their own forces? The skirmish in the Himalayas happened while I was the Secretary of State. And so I think they're testing and they're probing. I think they're doing that along the land-based boundaries with you all. I think they're doing in the sea-based boundaries with nearly every nation. I think you're seeing them press in Africa, not just commercially. We've seen greater Chinese military presence in South America. So not just commercial, not just that, which was for 15, 20 years, it was political commercial, right? Influence leverage through commercial. Now you're seeing generals show up and arms sales take place. So yes,
what happens next between India and China?
I don't know. It depends upon how India responds. If India is strong and bold as they were in that moment, I think Xi Jinping will take that for these folks are serious. By the way, I'm counting on there continuing to be U.S. support for that mission set as there was during that time. And if we get that right, I'm convinced we can push back against not only the PLA, but remember, the primary tools of power that Xi Jinping uses, we see the military stuff, we see the ships at sea. What are they? They're economic and they're propaganda, right? The United Front is operating here inside of India and inside the United States to convince the people of India that you all ought to just give up, that we're going to rule the world anyway, so just why fight it? Just start speaking Mandarin. Right? That's the same storyline they're telling all across the world, and we have to resist that, and we can.
Time's up, but my final question to you, Secretary Pompeo, what's next for you? Are you looking at being part of the administration, part of Trump 2.0?
We'll see. That's obviously President Trump's decision. He made a choice not to pick me at this point. He made that pretty clear, which is fine. He picked an all-new team this time. But for me, if you get called to serve and someone says, will you come help solve something or help America, you say yes to that.
You know, we've come to the end of what I'm sure all of you feel been a very captivating session. And before I thank Secretary Pompeo, I just want to acknowledge the fact that one of the most important people in India, one of the sharpest military and intelligence minds we've seen, our National Security Advisor, Mr. Ajit Doval, is here in the hall. We tried very hard, as we have for many years, to convince Mr. Doval to be on the stage and to speak.
He's so much smarter than that.
But in just the way that Doval Saab is, he said, I will come and I will listen and I will see and I shall absorb, which is what he's done. But he's been here very patiently listening to this conversation. But the fact that you've made the effort of taking out time, sir, means a lot. Thank you. Thank you for joining us here. And I hope at some point in time you'll change your mind. We can have you going from there and joining Secretary Pompeo and being here. But ladies and gentlemen, at the India Today Conclave, join me in raising a very warm round of applause as we thank Secretary Pompeo, who's flown in specially from the United States. And I want to tell all of you, he's expecting a grandchild, which is supposed to be breaking news and could literally happen anytime soon. So despite that personal situation, he's made this effort to come here, and that means a lot to all of us here at India Today. For your time and for your insights and being so combative and candid in your responses, Secretary Pompeo, thank you so much. Thank you, sir.
Arora, CMD, Yashoda Medicity, to come up on stage and present a small token of our appreciation to the former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. Ladies and gentlemen, raise a warm applause. Sir, just one second, just a photo opportunity. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, raise a warm applause. Thank you. Well, with that, we've come to the end of our marquee session of day one of the India Today Conclave in its 22nd edition. Do join us for dinner, and we'll see you tomorrow. Join us for dinner. All of this would not be possible without thanking our sponsors. The India Today Conclave, presented by RP Sanjeev Goenka Group, powered by GY Partner, UTI Mutual Funds, co-presented by BMW Developments, Conclave Partner, Hindustan Power, State Partner, Karnataka Information, Knowledge Partner, Reva University, Partner, Ultratech Cement, Health Partner, Yashoda Medicity, Associate Sponsor, NIFT, Celebration Partner, Radical Ketan, International School Partner, SSVM Institutions, Gifting Partner, Ravasol.
Luxury, heritage, and valor are timeless. Let them grow on you. Royal Ranthambore, India's finest yet.
Just where you live. It's a way of life, designed with precision, crafted for those who demand the extraordinary. A space for every chapter of life. This isn't just a home, it's your statement. B&W Developments, a legacy of innovation and excellence.